Hello and welcome to our second episode of AR Crunch. This is Sean, and today we are talking with Margaret Reel, co-chair of the MALT program for Pepperdine University. And today we're just going to talk a little bit about action research in the most general sense. We have Margaret here who's very experienced in the area of action research, and we're thankful that she was able to join us to share some of her ideas and expertise.
First question, I'll just ask a broad question, having you give a little bit of background to the length of time you've been considering action research and a little bit of the context of your work with Pepperdine. And so we can kind of establish, since we've got student perspectives and we've got some content from, existing action researchers or students in the middle of action research. So I wanted to kind of establish your credentials and, the depth of your focus on this to begin with, and then we'll go into the questions, if that's okay.
Okay. I've been teaching action research now since Cadre 5, which I guess is about 2005. And before that, I thought of action research. I've been involved in teacher research, but it's a little different than action research. But really getting a handle on action research was my first task, and I did that pretty much while teaching it. And then each year I've gotten better at it and gotten a little bit, figured out different parts of it that I could perfect. So, really thinking hard about reflection was probably my first real effort, and then it was trying to figure out how to help people who'd never written a lit review, what it means to review literature. And so that's been a really strong push. And as I've gotten more clear on the different levels of outcome of action research, I've gotten better at helping students frame those. And adding the logic model along with the force field has been another shift over time. 3 years ago, I became the chair of the Action Research Special Interest Group at AERA, which is a large, the American Education Research Association. And this puts me in contact with lots of action researchers around the world, and I've been following online discussion groups and really thinking about the different ways in which people characterize action research.
Well, that is really helpful. By way of background, can you give kind of an overview of the way that you look at the major phases of learning about action research?
It is about improving practice. It is about understanding more deeply how change takes place in your workplace, and it is about accepting a certain responsibility to hold yourself accountable for regular and ongoing learning and to share that learning with other people. I think there are 3 levels of outcomes from action research. On the personal, on the organizational, and on the scholarly levels. On the personal level, the action researcher is engaged in a process of improving their practice through a reflection on changes in skills, knowledge, and identity. They are very clearly putting themselves at the center of the action research. So they choose an action that they're taking, and they study that in real detail. On the second level, the organizational level, the researcher develops a deeper understanding of the factors that control change and result in group or organizational change. So it's not just about self-study. It's about self-study. It's about studying the actions that you take, and the actions are in a social setting. And by nature, and because actions have reactions, you're really studying organizational learning. So how do people in the context learn or change as a result of the action that you took? And then finally, at the scholarly level, this isn't just reflective practice. This is action research. And what makes it research is that it has a data collection process and a reflection and a sharing of that with other action researchers. The sharing of the information with other action researchers is really an important part of the scholarly outcome. We do research to learn more, but also to engage in a dialogue with other action researchers about the factors that are critical in change.
I really like the way that you look at things in that regard. I find myself trying to succinctly describe to people that might be affected by action research. I try and look for those kind of succinct definitions of what is action research in a real brief description. Do you have a favorite way to describe that to people who are entirely unfamiliar with action research but maybe engaging with someone who's working on action research?
It's a set of very clear steps to analyze your practice from a values perspective, to look and see how what happens in your workplace, whether it's in schools or in a business or in a museum, to see how what happens is related to your values. And where there's a discrepancy, there's a problem that you can approach. So how can you move your workplace closer to your values? And by analyzing the context in this way, you become better at finding problems. And finding problems is really an important part of action research. It is really more, it's a skill to develop. It's really hard to see problems. But to actually get better at finding problems is a part of the action researcher skill set. And then once you've found a problem, thinking deeply about that problem by engaging the problem in two ways. One is to look at the context in which it sits, and that will be part of the preparation for doing the action research. And the second is to look at the context in terms of the literature that explains the problem. So how have other people who have looked at this problem dealt with it? How do they find, what kinds of solutions have they found? So if we're talking about, for example, student engagement, there's a huge literature on factors that are important in student engagement and learning. And so looking at what others have written help you think about how to frame your action. So once you understand the context and the historical context, the written academic context, you're ready to take an action and then compare what happens in that action by collecting data and comparing it to what you expected to happen, and then reflecting on why you thought it happened. This is where you put together the data you collected with your assumptions, and then what would make it work better, and then that leads you into the next phase. And you continue to do this in a series of iterative actions that help you get closer to understanding both the change and your role in the change, and moving both you and your place of work closer in line with your values.